My name is Emma. I'm 22 years old, and the text that destroyed the last piece of my loyalty to my family came on my birthday. I was sitting in the library hunched over a pile of notes for my design thesis when my phone buzzed. I expected a simple happy birthday, or maybe nothing at all. My expectations were already that low. But instead, what appeared on my screen was a message from my father sold your laptop. Olivia needs a new phone. Be grateful we still feed you. For a second, I thought it was some cruel joke. I blinked, read it again. My laptop wasn't just a piece of metal and wires. It held my thesis, my future, my sleepless nights of work. It was the one thing I had managed to buy for myself after years of grinding through part-time jobs, juggling classes, and saving every penny. And just like that, with a text, it was gone, sold off because my younger sister wanted a shiny new iPhone. Before I could even let the shock settle, another message came through. Also, you'll pay her tuition, $6,000 by Friday. My chest tightened. My hands began to shake so violently I had to set the phone down. For years I had been bent, bruised, overlooked, but this was the moment something inside me turned to steel. I typed back 2 words. No chance. His reply came instantly like a hammer blow. Then get out. You're cut off. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Strangely, I felt a cold calm descend sharper than anything I'd ever known. It was the clarity of finally being pushed past the breaking point and realizing there was nothing left to lose. When I walked back into the house that night, I passed by Olivia's room. She was giggling as she unboxed her brand new phone, her face glowing in the blue light, completely oblivious to what had just been stolen from me. I stood there for a second, listening, my chest hollow, then kept walking to my own room. I pulled out a duffel bag and began packing. Essentials only. Clothes, toiletries, my passport, and most importantly, my backup hard drive. Then I reached into the back of my closet and pulled out the brown accordion folder I had hidden there for years. Inside were receipts, bank statements with highlighted transfers, IOUs I'd once made them sign as a joke. Every dollar I had been forced to give, every expense I had covered, every debt they never repaid. It was all there, meticulously recorded. The ledger my Aunt Rachel had once told me to keep, echoing my late grandfather's advice. No one can argue with the math. I carried the folder to the kitchen and placed it squarely in the middle of the table. On the front, in thick black marker, I wrote, for Mom, Dad, and Olivia. Then I walked out the back door, closing it softly behind me. I didn't look back. My first call was to Aunt Rachel. When she answered, I couldn't get the words out, but she didn't need me to. Her voice was warm, steady, the opposite of the chaos I had just left. Come here right now, she said. And so I did. Her apartment was small, cozy, filled with the smell of tea and old books. She just held me when I arrived, no questions asked. Sitting on her couch with a mug warming my trembling hands, I finally opened my spare laptop. For months, I had been keeping a draft email I prayed I'd never have to send. It was addressed to my grandmother Eleanor, my father's mother, the matriarch of the family, a woman whose sharp eyes missed nothing and whose word carried the weight of law. I attached the PDF scan of every single page in that folder, the proof of years of exploitation and lies. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and pressed send. The soft swoosh of the email leaving felt like a cannon blast in my chest. The next morning, my mother's voice came shrieking through Aunt Rachel's phone. She was hysterical. I didn't need to hear every word to imagine the scene back home. Olivia coming down for breakfast, opening the folder out of curiosity. Her eyes widening as she saw the statements, thousands of dollars labeled Olivia's expenses, her car repairs, her shopping sprees, all funded by me. And at the very back, the cruelest twist of all, documents showing how my parents had begun draining her trust fund too, after emptying mine completely. I could picture it, the betrayal dawning on her, realizing she wasn't the cherished golden child after all, but just another pawn. The fury in her eyes, my father's face going white, my mother's sobs filling the room. For years they had divided us. They made her the princess and me the workhorse, keeping us apart with jealousy and silence. But now the truth was laid bare in black and white, and the numbers didn't lie. The fallout was instant. My phone lit up like a siren that afternoon. Olivia's name flashed across the screen over and over. I didn't answer at first. Part of me wanted to imagine her sitting there holding the folder with shaking hands piecing together every lie. I thought of all the times she had flaunted gifts in my face, sneered when my clothes were secondhand, laughed when our parents mocked me for being too serious. I had hated her for years, but when I finally opened her message and read the words, I felt something colder than hate. How could they do this to me? Not to us, to her. She called again and again until I picked up. Her voice was ragged. Her usual arrogance cracked wide open. "Emma," she cried, "you knew about this. You let me believe they loved me more. You let me think you were jealous when really—" Her voice broke. "Really? They were using both of us." I didn't know how to answer. All I said was, "Now you know." And then I hung up. By evening, my parents were the ones calling. My father's first voicemail was all venom. "Ungrateful brat. Do you know what you've done? You've destroyed this family." My mother's message followed, dripping with hysteria. "Your sister hates us now, Emma." She locked herself in her room. "Are you happy you've poisoned her against us?" But the truth was, they had poisoned everything long before I exposed them. I had simply held up the mirror. Aunt Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table, watching me scroll through the flood of messages. She didn't look surprised. She only sipped her tea and said, "It was never about them loving Olivia more. It was about control. Favoritism is just another leash." Her words pierced me. For years I had carried the wound of being second best invisible next to my sister. Now I saw it clearly. We had both been pawns in their game. She was given the throne, I the chains, but neither of us were free. 2 days later, the phone calls stopped. The silence was louder than any screaming. Then a week later, I got an email, not from my parents, not from Olivia, but from my grandmother, Eleanor herself. "Emma, I received your email. Thank you for your courage. I always suspected something, but suspicion is not proof. You have given me proof. I need you to come to my house this Sunday. We'll settle this once and for all." My hands trembled as I read it. Eleanor wasn't just anyone in our family. She was the storm everyone feared and the sun everyone craved. Her approval was currency, her disapproval a curse. If she had chosen to side with my parents, I would have been cast out forever. But she had summoned me. Me, not them. Sunday came like a trial. Aunt Rachel drove me to Eleanor's estate, a sprawling old house perched on a hill, heavy with history and judgment. The family cars were already there, lined up in the driveway. My stomach twisted as we walked up the stone path. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. My parents sat stiffly on the velvet couch, Olivia beside them, her eyes red and swollen from days of crying. My father's jaw was clenched, my mother clutching tissues like lifelines. Olivia glanced at me, and for the first time in years, there was no mockery in her eyes, only betrayal. And then Eleanor entered. She was 81, sharp as ever, her cane clicking against the hardwood as if punctuating her authority. The room fell silent when she sat down. She looked at each of us in turn, her gaze cutting like glass. "I have read the documents," she said, finally, her voice low but steady. "I have seen where the money went, and I am ashamed." My mother burst into tears, instantly reaching for Eleanor's hand. "We only did what we thought was best." "Best for whom?" Eleanor snapped, yanking her hand away. Her eyes narrowed. "Certainly not for your eldest daughter who sacrificed everything. And not for Olivia either, who was fattened on lies while her trust fund was drained behind her back." My father tried to argue, but Eleanor cut him off with a single raised hand. "You sold Emma's laptop. On her birthday, you forced her to pay tuition that was not hers to bear, and then you dared to mock her for being ungrateful." Her voice rose thunder in the room. "You are parasites feeding off your own child." The silence after her words was suffocating. My father stared at the floor. My mother sobbed. Olivia's tears spilled over her hands, shaking in her lap. Then Eleanor turned to me, and for the first time in my life, her gaze softened. "Emma," she said, "I failed you by not watching closer, but I will not fail you now. From this day forward, your parents will have no access to the family trust. That money is yours and yours alone, and Olivia's share will be protected by a trustee, not them." The air left my lungs. It felt surreal, like hearing the universe speak a language I had never thought was meant for me. My parents gasped in outrage, my mother wailing, "You can't do this!" Eleanor's eyes flashed. "I just did." That was the moment everything shifted. The golden child had lost her shine, the tyrants had lost their power, and for the first time I had been chosen not as second best, not as invisible, but as worthy. The drive back from Eleanor's house was silent at first. Aunt Rachel kept her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the road, as if she knew I needed space to breathe. My phone buzzed nonstop in my lap, my parents unleashing every weapon they had left. Angry texts about how I had humiliated them, about how I was a traitor, about how I had turned Eleanor against them. Each message was more desperate than the last. But when I glanced at Olivia's name, I hesitated. She had sent only one text I didn't know. "I swear. I'm sorry." For years I had imagined what it would feel like to hear those words from her. Yet when they finally came, I felt nothing. Or maybe it wasn't nothing, it was release. I didn't need her apology to validate the years I had endured. The truth was already written in black and white, carved into the very bones of our family by Eleanor's decree. That night, lying in Aunt Rachel's guest room, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The weight of everything pressed down: the stolen laptop, the endless debts, the humiliation of being treated as less than human in my own home. But beneath it all was a flicker of something new: possibility. For the first time in my life, I had resources of my own, choices of my own, a future that wasn't shackled to their greed. The following week was chaos. My father tried to storm Eleanor's house, demanding she reconsider. He came back furious, ranting about how she had disowned him. My mother called relatives, weaving tales about how I had manipulated Eleanor with lies. But the receipts spoke louder than their stories. The proof I'd kept, the same proof they had mocked me for collecting, was the shield that deflected every attempt to twist the narrative. Meanwhile, Olivia was unraveling. She called me late one night, her voice small, stripped of its usual arrogance. "They told me I was special," she whispered. "They told me you were jealous, and I believed them. God, Emma, I believed everything." Her sobs cracked through the phone. For a moment, the sister I had hated felt like just another victim, another child raised in a house built on manipulation. I didn't forgive her, not then. But I didn't hang up either. I let her cry. I let her speak. And maybe that was the beginning of something neither of us could have imagined: the possibility of rebuilding, not as rivals, but as two girls finally free of the lies that had divided us. As weeks turned into months, I started piecing together a life that felt like mine. I bought a new laptop with money Eleanor wired directly into my account, and for the first time I typed without fear of someone ripping my work away. I finished my thesis. I applied for internships. I breathed without flinching at every vibration of my phone. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, grief hit me like a tidal wave. The grief of losing not just parents, but the illusion that they had ever truly loved me. Other days, anger simmered, the urge to scream at them, for every birthday stolen, every dream sacrificed. And sometimes late at night, guilt crept in: guilt for being the one Eleanor had chosen, guilt for leaving Olivia behind in the wreckage. Then came the letter, a thick envelope sealed with Eleanor's wax stamp. Inside was a handwritten note in her sharp cursive: "Emma, strength without compassion becomes cruelty. Compassion without strength becomes martyrdom. You must learn to balance both. I am leaving you the stewardship of what I once entrusted to your father. Use it wisely. Protect yourself, but never let the bitterness that destroyed them destroy you." Tucked behind the note were legal documents, papers naming me as the future executor of the family trust. My hands shook as I read them. Me. The girl who had been sold out for a phone. The girl who had been told to be grateful for scraps. Now entrusted with the responsibility my father had squandered. I cried, not just from relief, but from the crushing weight of it. It wasn't just vindication, it was a legacy. And with it came a choice: to perpetuate the cycle of power and favoritism, or to break it once and for all. In the months that followed, I watched my parents flail. They sold off pieces of themselves, trying to maintain the image of a life they no longer controlled. My mother's sobbing voicemails became routine. my father's threats empty echoes. And Olivia, she started coming around. Not with demands, not with entitlement, but with honesty. We met for coffee one afternoon, and for the first time in years, she didn't show up dressed to impress. She came as herself, puffy eyes, trembling hands, and a question that disarmed me completely. Do you think we can ever be sisters again? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was complicated. Because scars don't vanish just because the bleeding stops. But as I looked at her across that cafe table, I realized something. Maybe revenge wasn't about destroying them. Maybe it was about refusing to let them destroy me and refusing to let their poison keep us chained forever. I wasn't sure yet what forgiveness would look like, but I knew this for the first time I had the power to choose. The day I defended my thesis, I walked into the lecture hall with my new laptop tucked under my arm. It wasn't the laptop they stole from me, the one full of blood and sleepless nights. It was something better, something chosen, something mine. As I clicked through the slides, my voice steady and sure, I felt a kind of wholeness I had never known before. Every word was a defiance of the text my father had sent me on my birthday. Be grateful we still feed you. No, I would never again be grateful for scraps. I would be grateful for myself, for my work, my strength, my future. When I passed with praise from my professors echoing in my ears, I cried not just for the success, but for the girl who had once thought she didn't deserve it. Aunt Rachel hugged me tight after whispering, "See, the math always wins." And I laughed through my tears because it was true. Proof, persistence, truth, they had carried me here. But victory tasted complicated. A few weeks later, Olivia showed up at Aunt Rachel's door. She looked thinner, her face pale, her eyes ringed with shadows. "I can't stay there anymore," she whispered. "They scream at me all the time now. They blame me for losing Eleanor's trust. They said I ruined everything." It was like watching the golden child crumble into dust. For so long I had fantasized about this moment, her pedestal collapsing, her illusions shattering. I thought it would feel sweet like justice. Instead, it just felt sad. She was only 18, a pawn dressed as a princess. I let her inside. That night, as she curled up on Aunt Rachel's couch, clutching a pillow like a lifeline, she told me things I had never known. How Dad had pressured her to lie about me when she was little. How Mom used to say, "Emma can handle it." "You can't. That's why we protect you." How she had secretly envied my independence even while flaunting her privilege. She wept until her voice was hoarse, whispering over and over, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I didn't forgive her instantly. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a single act. It's 1,000 small choices to release anger, to make space for something new. But for the first time, I saw her not as the enemy, but as another survivor. We were both broken by the same hands, just in different ways. The final confrontation came sooner than I expected. Eleanor invited all of us to her house again, this time not for judgment, but for a reckoning. When we arrived, my parents looked gaunt, their arrogance eroded. My mother clutched my father's arm as though he were the only thing keeping her upright. Olivia sat beside me, silent, our alliance fragile but real. Eleanor spoke with the gravity of someone who had nothing left to fear. "This family has been poisoned by greed and cruelty," she said. "But poison only spreads if we let it. Emma, you will inherit stewardship of what is left. Olivia, your share will be restored. As for your parents," she fixed them with a stare so cold it could freeze oceans, "you are cut off permanently. You will not see another dollar from me, nor will you have a say in how this family moves forward." My father erupted, shouting about betrayal, about how he was her son. My mother sobbed that Eleanor was destroying the family. But Eleanor only shook her head. "No, you destroyed it yourselves." The silence that followed was like an earthquake settling. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted entirely. When we left that day, my parents didn't look at me. They stormed out without a word, their footsteps heavy with rage. Olivia lingered, her hand brushing mine as if asking silently for a chance, and I didn't pull away. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild not just my life, but myself. I got the internship I had dreamed of, designing spaces that felt alive, vibrant, healing. I paid off the last of the debts they had dumped on me. I started setting aside savings not out of fear, but out of hope. And slowly I began to feel the chains loosen. Sometimes late at night, I still heard my father's words in my head, "Be grateful we still feed you." But now I laughed when I remembered them, because I was no longer fed scraps at someone else's table. I was building my own table, my own feast. Olivia stayed with Aunt Rachel for a while, then eventually moved into a dorm when she started college. We weren't best friends overnight, but we were something closer to sisters than we had ever been. Sometimes she would send me late-night texts I wish I'd seen sooner, and sometimes I would reply, "So do I." But neither of us dwelled on the past for long. We were too busy writing new futures. The story didn't end with revenge. It ended with truth, with survival, with freedom. And maybe that's what karma really is. Not lightning striking from above, but the slow, steady turning of the world, until those who exploit fall into the pit they dug, and those who endured finally rise. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been made to feel invisible, if you've ever been told to be grateful for less than you deserve, I want you to know this: you are not alone, and you are not powerless. Please like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment with your story. Because sometimes the greatest power we have is in telling the truth out loud.